The porch light was still on when Jack arrived home. He insisted on it being left on all night for Donald's sake as a beacon to guide his brother home. He turned it off now that it was bright outside and tiptoed around the cottage quietly, careful not to wake Gloria, who was enjoying her Sunday lie-in. Scouring through the linen basket of dirty clothes, he grabbed the least crumbled garment he could find and quickly changed out of one check shirt and into another. He hadn't washed as he didn't want the electric shower and ceiling fan in the bathroom to wake her. He'd even held back from flushing the toilet. He knew it wasn't his overflowing generosity that was causing him to behave that way. And yet, he couldn't quite summon the shame in knowing that it was exactly the opposite. He was deliberately keeping his meeting with Sandy short a secret from Gloria and the rest of his family. It was as much to help them as it was to help him. In their hearts, they were beginning to move on. They were trying their utmost to settle back into their lives after the major upheaval and upset of suffering the loss of not one but two family members in 1 year. Jack understood their positions. They had all reached a point where no more days off work could be taken. Sympathetic smiles were being replaced by everyday greetings, and conversations with neighbors were returning to normal. Imagine, people were actually talking about other things and not asking questions or offering advice. Cards filled with comforting words had stopped landing on his doormat. People had gone back about their own lives. Employers had moved around shifts as much as possible, and now it was back to business for all concerned. But to Jack, it felt wrong and awkward for life to resume without Donald. Truthfully, it wasn't Donald's absence that held Jack back from joining his family and bravely carrying on with the rest of his life. Of course he missed him, but as with the death of his mother, he could and would eventually get through the grief. Instead, it was the mystery that surrounded his disappearance. All the unanswered questions left question marks dotting his vision like the aftermath of flash photography. He closed the door behind him to the cluttered one-bedroom bungalow where he and Gloria had lived for 5 years. Just like his father, Jack had worked as a cargo handler at Shannon Point's port his entire working life. He had chosen Glen Village, 13 kilometers west of Foynes, for the meeting with Sandy Short, as it was a place none of his family inhabited. He sat in a small cafe at 9 a.m., a half hour before they were due to meet. Sandy had said on the phone that she was always early, and he was eager, fidgety, and more than willing to give his fresh idea a go. The more time they had together, the better. He ordered a coffee and stared at the most recent photograph of Donald on the table before him. It had been printed in almost every newspaper in Ireland and seen on notice boards and shop windows for the past year. In the background of the photo was the fake white Christmas tree his mother had set up in the living room every year. The bubbles caught the flash of the camera and the tinsel twinkled. Donald's mischievous smile grinned up at Jack as though he was taunting him, daring him to find him. Donald had always loved playing hide and seek as a child. He would stay hidden for hours if it meant winning. Everyone would become impatient and declare Donald was the winner just so that he could leave his place with a proud, beaming smile. This was the longest search Jack had ever endured, and he wished his brother would come out of his hiding place now, show himself with that proud smile, and end the game. Donald's blue eyes, the only similar feature between the two brothers, sparkled up at Jack, and he almost expected him to wink. No matter how long and hard he stared at the photograph, he couldn't inject any life into it. He couldn't reach into the print and pull his brother out. He couldn't smell the aftershave he used to engulf himself in. He couldn't ruffle his brown hair and ruin his hairstyle as he annoyingly had. And he couldn't hear his voice as he helped their mother around the house. 1 year on, he could still remember the touch and smell of him, though unlike the rest of his family, to him the memory alone wasn't enough. The photo had been taken the Christmas before last, just 6 months before he went missing. Jack used to call round to his mother's house once a week, where Donald was the only one of 6 siblings who remained living there. Apart from the habitual short casual conversations between Jack and Donald that lasted for no more than 2 minutes at a time, that Christmas was the last occasion Jack had spoken to Donald properly. Donald had given him the usual present of socks, and Jack had given him the box of handkerchiefs his oldest sister had given him the year before. They'd both laughed at the thoughtlessness of their gifts. That day, Donald had been animated, happy with his new job as a computer technician. He'd begun it in September after graduating from Limerick University, a ceremony at which their mother had almost toppled of her chair, such was the weight of her pride for her baby. Donald had spoken confidently about how he enjoyed the work, and Jack could see how much he had matured and become more comfortable after leaving student life behind. They had never been particularly close. In the family of 6 children, Donald was the surprise baby, nobody more surprised than their mother, Frances, who was 47 at the time she learned of the pregnancy. Being 12 years older than Donald meant that Jack had moved out of home by the time Donald was 6. He lost out in knowing the secret sides to his brother that only living with someone brought, and so for 18 years they had been brothers, but not friends. Jack wondered, not for the first time, if he had known Donald better, whether he could have solved part of the mystery. Maybe if he'd worked harder at getting to know his little brother, or had had more conversations about something rather than nothing, then perhaps he could have been out with him on the night of his birthday. Maybe he could have prevented him from leaving that fast food restaurant, and maybe he could have left with him and shared a taxi. Or maybe Jack would have found himself in the same place as Donald was right now, wherever that place was.